By 8:45 a.m. on that Monday, I could already tell it was going to be a nightmare. My day had started off like any other. I kissed my wife Vanessa goodbye before heading out. We'd been together for 15 years. She was a successful real estate agent, always flaunting her commissions like trophies. It wasn't her success that bothered me, but the way she reveled in it, as if her work defined her entire worth. "And have a great day," she said, using that overly polished, client-friendly voice she knew I couldn't stand. Her smirk hinted at something she wasn't saying, and it stayed with me all the way to the office. Between that and the mountain of reports I had due by the end of the month, my nerves were already frayed by the time I arrived at 7:45. I set down my briefcase and decided to grab a quick coffee before starting my day, but that's when things went completely sideways. While I was in the men's room, a sharp, burning pain hit me out of nowhere, so intense that I let out an involuntary yell. Within moments, my boss, Brian Hayes, was at the door. "Everything all right, Ethan?" I grimaced, showing him the odd greenish discharge. His expression turned serious. "You need to see a doctor right away," he said. "Don't worry about the reports. I'll take care of things here. Just focus on getting yourself checked out." Brian's support was a relief. After thanking him, I grabbed my briefcase, told the receptionist I'd be out for at least a day, and headed for the urgent care clinic a few blocks from the office. Normally, I'd have gone to my regular doctor, but his office was too far away, and I wasn't in the mood to wait for an appointment. At the clinic, they wasted no time in taking some samples, and then I was left in the waiting room. 30 minutes crawled by before a nurse finally called my name. Her cold tone made me feel oddly judged. She led me into an observation room, checked my vitals in silence, and left with a curt, "The doctor will be in shortly." A few minutes later, an older man in a white coat entered. "Mr. Cooper, I'm Dr. Roberts," he said, sitting down and opening my file. He didn't beat around the bush. "Your test results show you have gonorrhea." I blinked, stunned. "Gonorrhea? How is that possible?" I managed to ask. "It's a sexually transmitted infection," he explained. "I'll prescribe an antibiotic. You'll need to avoid any sexual activity for at least 7 days after completing the treatment. If symptoms persist, follow up with your primary doctor." The news felt like a punch in the gut. "I've only been with one person," I said quietly. "My wife." He gave me a look that was a mix of sympathy and professionalism. She may not have shown obvious symptoms. Women often mistake early signs for something minor, like a bladder infection. It's important she gets tested soon to avoid complications. After handing me a prescription and having me sign some forms, he added, "Take care, Mr. Cooper. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any further questions." I left the clinic feeling a mix of anger, confusion, and disbelief. How could this happen? On the way to my car, I called Brian to update him. "I'm sorry to hear that, Ethan," he said sympathetically. "Take the time you need. Your reports are covered. Just focus on getting better." "Thanks, Brian," I said before hanging up. But the harder conversation was yet to come. I had to tell my parents. They'd always been my support system, and I wasn't about to hide something like this from them. I dialed their number, and my dad picked up. "Hey, son, you at work?" he asked. "No, Dad. I'm dealing with something personal, and I need to talk to you and Mom," I said. "Everything okay with the kids?" he asked, his tone instantly concerned. "They're fine. I just need to talk in person," I replied. "Come over, then. We'll have coffee and talk," he said without hesitation. After hanging up, I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the conversation ahead. Before I go on, you should know a bit about my background. My sister Jessica and I grew up in a strict but loving household. Our parents were devoutly religious and firm believers in traditional values. One of their main rules was no intimacy before marriage, a rule I followed to the letter. When I started dating Vanessa, I told her I planned to wait until marriage. She didn't seem bothered by it. In fact, she smiled, kissed me, and said, "That's sweet. Don't worry. I'll make sure our wedding night is unforgettable." She kept that promise. On our wedding night, she was patient and affectionate, guiding me through everything with care. Over time, I learned how to please her, and I thought we had built a strong, trusting relationship. Vanessa had been with other men before me, but I never let it bother me. I believed what mattered was that she was committed to us. Soon after we married, she dove into her real estate career, quickly rising through the ranks. A year later, we welcomed our first daughter, Chloe, and then Sophie came along the following year. After a difficult delivery with Sophie, Vanessa decided to have her tubes tied, saying she was done having kids. I'd always wanted a son, but my daughters quickly became the center of my world. They were bright, joyful, and full of life. Being their dad was the most rewarding part of my life, and even though I missed out on having a boy, I felt complete with them. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good, or so I thought. Now, with everything happening, that sense of stability felt like it was crumbling beneath me. When Vanessa returned to work after maternity leave, I found myself slipping into the role of Mr. Mom more often than I expected. Whether she was working late or catching up on paperwork, I was the one shuttling the girls around, Chloe to her music lessons and Sophie to her sports practices, especially when Vanessa's job kept her out in the evenings. At first, it seemed manageable, but as time went on, Vanessa's absences increased. She began attending seminars and company retreats more frequently, often over weekends or for a full week at a time. She always called us at night, but her growing distance was hard to ignore. What bothered me even more was the fake persona she developed, a polished, almost rehearsed attitude she adopted around everyone. I hated it, and I brought it up more than once, but she didn't seem to care. She was more invested in her career than ever, and even our daughters started noticing the shift in her priorities. Still, despite my frustration, the idea of her being unfaithful never crossed my mind. Vanessa knew how strongly I felt about loyalty, especially infidelity. Later that day, I pulled into my parents' driveway, feeling heavy with the weight of what I had to tell them. My dad greeted me at the door with a warm hug. "We just finished a pot of coffee. Come on in. We'll make more and talk," he said. Inside, I hugged my mom, and we all sat around the dining room table. She poured me a cup of coffee, and I added my usual cream and butter pecan syrup, while Dad did the same. "Let's start with a prayer," Dad suggested, as was their way. After a few minutes of prayer, we got down to business. "What's wrong, son?" Dad asked, concern written all over his face. "I just came from urgent care," I said. "I was diagnosed with gonorrhea." "Oh my God," Dad said quietly, always composed but visibly shaken. "Were you messing around?" he asked carefully after a pause. "No, Dad. Never. Vanessa is the only woman I've ever been with," I assured him. He nodded, his expression softening. "I believe you, son. I just needed to hear it from you." "What are you going to do?" Mom asked, her voice tinged with sadness. "I don't see any other option but divorce," I admitted, the words feeling heavy in my mouth. "It's going to be hard on the girls, but they're old enough to understand. Even if she promises it won't happen again, I can't trust her anymore." "Do you know how long this has been going on?" Dad asked. "No, I just found out this morning," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "But adultery is a clear ground for divorce." "Hold on a second," Dad said, getting up and heading to his office. Mom sat quietly, looking heartbroken. "I'm so sorry this is happening, Ethan," she said softly. "I always thought Vanessa was such a good woman." "Me too, Mom. Looks like she fooled us all," I replied bitterly. Dad returned with his Rolodex and flipped through it until he found a card. "Here it is," he said. "You know Emily Parker? The family law attorney from our church?" "Yes, I know her," I said, surprised. "Let me give her a call," he said, dialing the number. As a deacon, Dad had plenty of contacts in the congregation. He got through to Emily's secretary, then Emily herself. I listened as he explained the situation. "Emily, hi. It's Henry Cooper." "Yes, from church. My son's in a tough spot, and I think he could use your help." "Oh, really? You're free at 12:30? That's perfect. I'll make sure he's there." "Thanks, Emily. We owe you one. Take care." After hanging up, Dad turned to me. "She can see you today at 12:30. Bring your financials and the past 2 years of tax returns." "Got it. I'll get everything together," I said, realizing I needed to gather those documents quickly. "And Ethan, you have to tell Vanessa about the STD. She needs to get tested too. It's a health risk for everyone." Maybe the girls should stay with us for a few days, Mom suggested. Things might get tense at home. Good idea, Dad agreed. Why don't you bring them over after school? We'll take care of them and make sure they get to school on time. Thanks, Dad. I'll do that, I said, grateful for their support. We chatted for a while longer before I got up to leave. Dad hugged me at the door. It'll work out, son. Just don't do anything rash. I know you're hurt and probably angry, but don't let revenge cloud your judgment. Remember Romans 12 verse 19. Vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. Don't make me have to bail you out of jail. Think about your girls. I managed a small grin. No problem, Dad. I got it. I got back in my car and headed home. Dad was right. I wanted revenge. After over 15 years of loving Vanessa exclusively, this betrayal cut deep. When I arrived home, I started digging through my files to find our old tax returns. I also needed Vanessa's, because about 8 years ago, she had suggested we file separately to save money. Back then, I didn't question it. It seemed logical. But as I examined her returns, I discovered something that left me stunned. Vanessa had been earning far more in bonuses and commissions than she'd ever let on. While she contributed a fair amount to our joint account, a significant portion of her income was unaccounted for. I couldn't help but wonder, where had all that extra money gone? While rummaging through Vanessa's files, I stumbled upon a folder filled with bank statements from a bank I didn't even recognize. The most recent statement showed an account balance close to $1 million, saved over the past 8 years. I couldn't help but wonder what her plan was. Was this money meant for the kids' college, retirement, or something else entirely? I gathered the bank statements along with her tax forms, stuffed them in my folder, and headed out to my car. Just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Running late. Got a showing. Don't wait for dinner. Sure, I thought to myself. I replied with a simple, no problem. See you when you get home, leaving out the usual I love you. I wondered if she'd noticed the change, or if she even cared anymore. I drove to Emily Parker's office, parked, and made my way inside. Her receptionist, an attractive blonde, greeted me. I'm here to see Emily Parker. I have a 12:30 appointment, I said. After checking her schedule, she smiled politely and led me to Emily's office. Ethan, it's good to see you, Emily said warmly, shaking my hand. Would you like some coffee? That would be great, thanks, I replied. Emily asked the receptionist for 2 cups of coffee, along with butter and nuts. Moments later, we were seated with our drinks, ready to talk. Your father called me this morning, Emily began. He mentioned you're dealing with a serious issue. Can you tell me what's going on? I took a deep breath and explained everything. My visit to the clinic, the diagnosis, Vanessa's apparent infidelity, and the discovery of the hidden bank account. Emily listened carefully, nodding as she processed the information. I'm really sorry you're going through this, she said sincerely. It's never easy, especially when you have kids involved. Let me explain how things work here. In this state, we have no-fault divorce laws, which means either party can file for divorce without assigning blame. However, if you have evidence of adultery, it can strengthen your position when negotiating things like custody and assets. What about the STD? I asked. Surely that counts for something? It's a strong point, Emily acknowledged. But her attorney might argue that you contracted it elsewhere. We know that's not true, but we'd need solid evidence to convince a judge. And the money? She's been secretly saving for years. She could claim it's a surprise fund for retirement or something similar, Emily said. But honestly, it looks more like an exit strategy. She's probably been planning this for a while, maybe waiting until the girls are older to avoid complications. Proving that in court will be difficult, but not impossible. So, what are my options? I pressed. We can hire a private investigator, Emily suggested. It'll cost you, but it could provide the hard evidence we need. Let's do it, I agreed without hesitation. Okay, Emily said. I'll need details, her car's make and model, license plate number, and any places she frequently visits. I pulled out my phone and opened an app. A few months ago, Vanessa had lost her phone, and I'd installed a tracker app on it in case she misplaced it again. Surprisingly, the tracker was still active. I located her phone at a house on the north side of town and showed Emily the address. Perfect, she said, jotting down the information. She called her investigator, giving him the details. After hanging up, she turned back to me. We'll handle this discreetly. If there's anything going on, we'll find out soon enough. She then shifted focus. You have 2 teenage daughters, Chloe and Sophie, right? Ages 14 and 13? Yes, that's right, I confirmed. They're not quite old enough to choose which parent they want to live with, but they're close, Emily explained. If you want to seek custody, we can make a case for it. Courts often favor mothers for primary custody, but given Vanessa's frequent absences and the current situation, we have a shot. I've been the primary caretaker in the evenings, I said. Vanessa's often out late for work. Got it. Just to clarify, are you certain the girls are biologically yours? She asked gently. I believe so, yes, I replied, feeling a bit defensive. But does it matter? My name's on their birth certificates, and I've raised them since they were born. Understood, Emily said. But it might still be worth confirming, just in case. I can refer you to a lab for a paternity test if you want. Okay, I'll think about it, I said. What about the house? There's no mortgage, I explained. The house belonged to my grandparents. It's in a family trust under my parents' names. They let us live there. That simplifies things, Emily said, making a note. No mortgage means fewer financial complications, but we'll still need to address personal property and any other assets. I'll prepare a checklist for you. Is there anything else I need to do right now? I asked. Not at the moment, Emily replied. I'll start drafting the paperwork, but let's wait until the investigator provides us with more information before proceeding too far. In the meantime, complete the checklist and gather any documents I might need. Do you think I should confront her directly about the STD? I asked. At the very least, she needs to know, Emily said. It's important for both of you to get treated properly. That makes sense, I agreed. Emily handed me a checklist and a card with the lab's contact information. Anything else I should know? I asked. That's all for now, Emily said. Handle those tasks, and we'll contact you once we hear back from the investigator. I thanked her and left, feeling slightly more in control of the situation but still overwhelmed. This wasn't going to be easy, but at least I had a plan. And right now, that was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. For any questions about fees, just speak to my secretary. And Ethan? Emily said, her voice softening. Yes? Don't do anything rash. We'll get through this together. It won't be easy, but things will improve. I understand, I said, genuinely appreciating her support. Thanks for everything. You're welcome. We'll keep in touch, she replied with a reassuring smile. With that, I left her office, wrote a check for her services, and headed straight to the lab to pick up the DNA test kit. Afterward, I stopped by the bank to verify some of the financial details Emily had mentioned earlier. By the time I got home, I was exhausted. For some, this might have been a moment to drown their sorrows in alcohol, but that's never been my style. Growing up in a household where drinking was frowned upon, I never developed the habit. Instead, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table to think. Just as the coffee finished brewing, the front door burst open, and my 2 daughters, Chloe and Sophie, came in from school. They usually took the bus home around this time, but it was rare for them to find me already there. Daddy, you're home, Chloe said with surprise. Are you okay? Yeah, Daddy. Why are you home so early? Sophie chimed in, concern evident in her voice. It's been a hectic day, I said, trying to keep things light. Listen, girls, I need you to pack a few things. You're going to stay with Grandma and Grandpa for a couple of days. Why, Daddy? Sophie asked, her voice trembling. Did something happen? Is something wrong with Mom? Did you guys have a fight? Well, yes, something is wrong, I admitted, keeping my tone calm. But no, we haven't had a fight. That might happen later. You caught her cheating, didn't you? Chloe said bluntly, catching me completely off guard. What makes you say that? I asked, stunned by her question. Chloe looked down, embarrassed. I heard her on the phone a couple of times. She was using that fake voice she does, you know, the one that annoys you. She said something like, I can't wait to see you again, love. And then she giggled. Not like herself? It sounded really personal. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I know you hate gossip. It's okay, I said, pulling her into a hug. Thanks for telling me. She's been acting strange lately, Chloe continued. Like she doesn't really want to talk to us. I turned to Sophie. Do you feel that way too? She nodded. Yeah. It's like she doesn't want us bothering her. I gave them both a reassuring hug. You can bother me anytime, I said with a smile. But right now, I need to swab your cheeks for a test. A cheek swab? Sophie asked, eyeing the kit suspiciously. Yes, I confirmed. My lawyer thinks it's a good idea to do a DNA test. You don't think we're really your kids? Chloe asked, her voice trembling with worry. Of course, you're my kids, I reassured her quickly. This is just to confirm everything legally. Nothing will change how I feel about you, okay? So, are you getting a divorce? Chloe asked directly. It looks that way, I admitted. Isn't there any way you can forgive her? Sophie asked softly, her eyes wide with concern. I don't think so, I said honestly. She made a mistake that's pretty serious. I had to see a doctor about it this morning. Chloe gasped, nearly letting out a curse word. Sorry, she mumbled. It's okay, I said with a weak smile. I felt like swearing today too. Now, let's get these samples done. I gently swabbed Chloe's cheek, then did the same for Sophie. After securing their samples in the kit, I took a swab from my own cheek and placed it into a separate vial. Okay, girls, go upstairs and pack enough for a couple of nights. Don't forget your homework. We need to leave in 15 minutes. While they packed, I organized the DNA test kit and gathered a few essentials for myself. Once we were ready, I loaded their bags into the car, and we headed to my parents' house. During the drive, Chloe broke the silence. Daddy, if you get divorced, can I stay with you? Yeah, me too, Sophie added. I hope so, girls. I'm going to ask for custody, but you should know that courts usually favor the mother in these cases. I don't want to stay with her, Chloe confessed quietly. Right now, I hate her for what she did. I considered telling her not to hate her mother, but I held back. Her feelings mirrored my own too closely. I understand how you feel, sweetheart, I said gently. Just remember, no matter what happens, I love you both, and I'll always be here for you. We love you too, Daddy, Chloe said, tears streaming down her face. Her tears only strengthened my resolve. Anger and hurt surged through me, but I remembered my dad's words, vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord. They echoed in my mind, calming my more vengeful thoughts. When we pulled into my parents' driveway, Dad came out to greet us, giving the girls warm hugs as they carried their bags inside. Mom soon followed, wrapping me in a comforting hug. I'd better get to the lab before it closes, I said after a few moments. Are you okay? Dad asked, concern etched on his face. As okay as I can be under the circumstances, I replied honestly. We'll be praying for you, he said. Give us a call and let us know how things go with Vanessa. I will, though I'm not sure when that'll be. It's okay, son, Mom said reassuringly. You can call anytime. Thanks, Mom, I said, hugging her tightly. I'd better head out. I got back in my car and drove to the lab, arriving with about 30 minutes to spare. After handing the DNA test kit to the receptionist, I left, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on me. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. I was determined to do whatever it took to protect my girls and get through this ordeal. How soon can I expect the results? I asked the receptionist at the lab. We should have them ready by the end of the week, she replied with a reassuring smile. Great, thanks, I said before heading back to my car. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about Vanessa's behavior. I needed to talk to someone who might have some insight, someone who knew her well. I decided to call her sister, Natalie. I connected my Bluetooth earpiece and dialed her number. She picked up after the second ring. Hey, Ethan, how's my favorite brother-in-law? She greeted cheerfully. I've had better days, I replied. Do you have a minute to talk? Of course. What's going on? Have you spoken to Vanessa recently? Not since the family gathering last month at our place. I took a deep breath and gave her a brief explanation of what was happening. Natalie gasped when I finished. Oh my God, Ethan. I hate to say this, but it sounds like she's fallen back into old patterns. Old patterns? I asked, puzzled. Natalie hesitated before answering. Vanessa was wild in her younger years, jumping from one relationship to another, never staying loyal. She wasn't faithful to anyone in high school or college. I thought she changed after meeting you. She even told me she'd found her soulmate and was done with her old ways. I didn't think it was necessary to bring it up. I wish I'd known, I admitted, trying to keep my emotions in check. I'm sorry, Ethan. I should have told you. It's not your fault, I assured her. I'm calling because I may need to ask her to move out. Would it be possible for her to stay with you for a while? Natalie sighed on the other end. She could stay here for a bit, but James won't be thrilled. I don't want to cause trouble for you, I said. It's okay. He'll manage, as long as it's not for too long. How are the girls handling it? They're upset, but managing better than I expected. You've raised strong young women, Ethan. Stay strong for them. I'm trying, I said. I've got to go make dinner now. We'll talk later. Take care, Ethan. Back home, I warmed up some leftover meatloaf for dinner. Just as I finished eating, my phone rang again. It was Emily. Hey, I greeted her. Working late? For you, yes, she replied. I've received some preliminary findings from the private investigator. It appears Vanessa's been quite active. She's met with 3 different men today alone. I was stunned. 3 men in one day? How does she even find the time? Unfortunately, yes, Emily confirmed. I'm sending over the details now, photos, videos, and a summary of the report. I'd advise against watching the video, but you should listen to the last few minutes of the audio. It's very revealing. Do you think we have enough to proceed with the divorce? I asked. Absolutely. Listen to the audio, then call me. Will do. Thanks, Emily. After hanging up, I opened my laptop, accessed my email, and found the files Emily had sent. Reluctantly, I fast-forwarded through the video to the part she had highlighted. I wasn't interested in seeing Vanessa in compromising situations, but I needed to hear what she had said. In the recording, a man's voice asked, I see you're married. For the moment, Vanessa replied casually. I noticed you're married too, she added, glancing at his ring. Yes, my wife and I have an open relationship. And you? It's not open in that sense, but I take my freedoms as they come, she said without hesitation. So your husband doesn't know? No, he has no idea, she confessed. He doesn't know the kind of person he's married to. Listening, I felt a wave of bitterness rise in my chest. I was starting to realize just how little I truly knew about her. What's the matter? Isn't he good to you at home? The man asked. He had better be, Vanessa replied smugly. I taught him everything he knows. You taught him? The man asked, surprised. Believe it or not, he was a 23-year-old virgin when we got married. He's religious, doesn't drink, smoke, or curse. He'd probably have a fit if I swore around him. He didn't even know how to make love until we were married. Damn, the man reacted. Sounds like you think he's a loser. Why stay with him? Is there love? In some way, I suppose. He's a good father, takes care of the girls, and doesn't complain when I come home late. But beyond that, he's dull. Are the girls even his? The man asked. She shrugged casually. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe. Doesn't really matter to me. He believes they're his, and that's what counts. How long have you been fooling around? Throughout our marriage, she admitted breezily. He's clueless, hasn't been with anyone else, so how would he know? That was it. I paused the recording, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. After everything we'd been through, this was how she saw me. Just a gullible fool raising kids she wasn't even sure were mine. I sat back in my chair, the weight of her betrayal settling over me like a crushing burden. I didn't know what hurt more, her infidelity or the sheer contempt she seemed to have for me all these years. Hearing Vanessa speak so casually about our life, our marriage, and even our children left me gutted. She dismissed everything we'd built together as if it meant nothing. The depth of her betrayal was far worse than I'd ever imagined. My stomach churned, and I had to fight the urge to throw up. The thought of her living a lie for our entire marriage made me physically sick. Do you plan to stick with him? The man asked in the recording. Yeah, for now. At least until the girls finish high school and head off to college, she replied nonchalantly. That's in about 4 or 5 years. I'll have everything ready to leave by then. Why wait? Well, the courts usually favor the mom in custody cases, and the last thing I want is to end up with 2 teenage girls on my hands. The conversation continued with chilling ease. What will you do after that? Oh, I want a party. Maybe hang out with a few guys at once. Or retire to Costa Rica, who knows, she said with a laugh. I've got a couple of guys lined up already. Can you sneak away for a weekend? He asked. Sure. I'll tell Ethan it's a mandatory seminar or something. He'll believe anything I say, she answered, smiling confidently. Let me know when you're free, and we'll arrange it. You have my number. I will, she said, grinning. The man checked his watch. It's getting late. I need to go, but I can't wait to see you again. Me too, Vanessa responded eagerly. After he left, she sat on the bed, smiling to herself. Oh, Ethan, she said to the empty room, you have no idea what's coming. I shut my laptop and sat there, stunned. Tears welled up as I processed what I had just seen and heard. 15 years of marriage, all those moments we shared, dismissed with a smirk. She was planning her exit, counting down the years until she could leave without complication. The depth of her betrayal left me feeling hollow. I wiped my eyes, took a deep breath, and dialed Emily. I just finished watching the video, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. You were right. It was enlightening. What's your next move? She asked. Burn it to the ground, I replied firmly. Consider it done, Emily said. I'll get started on finalizing the divorce papers. If Vanessa thinks she's running the show, she's wrong. We'll make sure this ends on your terms. Thanks, Emily. I owe you for this. Just take good care of your girls. They'll need you now more than ever, she said before we ended the call. I leaned back on the couch, overwhelmed by a mix of grief and anger. 15 years of loyalty, trust, and love, all thrown away without a second thought. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I thought about my daughters. I had to stay strong for them, no matter how shattered I felt inside. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Vanessa calling. Hi, I answered, keeping my tone neutral. Hey, Ethan, are you okay? She asked, her voice sounding upbeat, almost cheerful. It's been a tough day, I admitted. What's up? I just wrapped up at work. Looks like I closed another sale, she said, clearly pleased with herself. That's good, I replied, forcing myself to stay calm. When will you be home? I should be there in about half an hour. Okay, see you then. Love you, she said, her voice taking on that same insincere tone she'd used in the recording. Me too, I replied, hanging up before she could say more. I wondered briefly if she noticed my lack of I love you in return, but then realized I didn't care anymore. I gathered the evidence I had printed, 4 photos of Vanessa with different men, neatly arranged on a single sheet, and placed them in a folder. I left the folder on the kitchen table, planning to confront her when she arrived home. With everything set, I brewed a cup of coffee and sat down to wait. As the minutes dragged on, an hour passed. Then 2. Vanessa still hadn't come home. Frustration mixed with concern as I tried calling her cell phone, only to be sent straight to voicemail. I left a message and followed up with a text, but there was no reply. By the time 3 hours had passed, worry began to creep in. I started imagining the worst. What if she'd been in an accident? Just as panic began to take hold, my home phone rang. I rushed to answer it, hoping it was her. Ethan Cooper, I said anxiously. Mr. Cooper, this is Angela Collins from Mercy Hospital. Are you related to Vanessa Cooper? She's my wife, I replied, my heart sinking. Mr. Cooper, your wife was in an accident and has been brought here for treatment. Can you come as soon as possible? Yes, of course. Is she okay? What happened? I asked, my voice trembling. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't provide any details over the phone. Her doctor will explain everything when you arrive. Please come to the courtesy desk, and they'll direct you from there. Thank you, I said, trying to stay composed. After hanging up, I slipped the envelope with the photos into my jacket pocket. I considered calling my dad or Natalie for support, but decided to wait until I knew more. The drive to the hospital felt like an eternity. My mind raced with unanswered questions, fear tightening in my chest. When I arrived, I parked quickly and hurried inside. At the courtesy desk, I introduced myself. I'm Ethan Cooper. I'm here to see Vanessa Cooper. The woman behind the counter looked up her information and nodded to a staff member nearby. Would you please escort Mr. Cooper to the ICU? A nurse gestured for me to follow, and we walked in silence down a long corridor. As we approached the ICU, a police officer was waiting for me. Mr. Cooper, he asked. That's me. I'm Officer Reynolds. I responded to your wife's accident, he explained. She was driving through the intersection at 3rd and Main when a drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car on the driver's side. My heart ached at the details. I'm very sorry, he added sincerely. It's okay, I managed to say, though nothing about the situation felt okay. The car was towed to a nearby yard. There's not much left of it, he continued, handing me a card from the towing company. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to call. I nodded, taking the card, and braced myself for what lay ahead. Thank you, officer, I said, accepting the card. My mind spun with worry as I prepared to see Vanessa, unsure of what condition she was in, or how I felt about it all. When the officer left, a man in a white medical coat approached me. Ethan Cooper, he asked. Yes, I replied. I'm Dr. Morgan, the physician overseeing your wife's treatment. Can we talk privately for a moment? Of course. He led me to a small consultation room, closed the door, and gestured for me to sit. He took a seat across from me at a round table. How's my wife? I asked, bracing myself for the worst. She has multiple broken bones, including several fractured ribs and significant internal injuries. She also suffered a severe head trauma. We've placed her in a medically induced coma to aid her recovery. I nodded, trying to absorb the gravity of her condition. Is there anything else? Yes, and I'm afraid it's more concerning news. Preliminary tests indicate that your wife may be HIV positive. We've sent her samples for more detailed testing, but it will take time to confirm. A cold wave of shock washed over me. I just found out this morning that she has gonorrhea, I said, still reeling from the morning's events. Dr. Morgan's expression didn't waver. Are you receiving treatment for that? Yes, I started it today. That's good. However, I strongly recommend you get tested for HIV as soon as possible. It's important to know your status. If you can, see your primary care physician tomorrow. I nodded numbly, taking in his advice. How long will she be in the coma? It depends on her progress, but it could be anywhere from 10 days to 2 weeks. Even after she wakes, her recovery will likely be slow, and she'll need extended care. Can I see her now? Of course, he said, standing. She needs your support now more than ever. He pointed down the hall. She's in room 5. Thank you, doctor, I said, shaking his hand before heading toward her room, my mind racing with everything I just learned. As I walked in, the sight of her hit me hard. Vanessa was swathed in bandages, her left leg encased in a cast that extended to her hip. Her face was bruised, swollen, and stitched in multiple places. She looked like she had barely survived a war. Despite everything, it pained me to see her like this. Silently, I said a prayer for her, asking for strength, for both of us. Then, with a heavy heart, I slipped off my wedding ring, pulled out the envelope with the photos, wrote her name on the front, and placed my ring inside before sealing it. I turned to the nurse monitoring Vanessa's vitals. Could you make sure she gets this when she wakes up? I asked, holding out the envelope. Of course, the nurse replied warmly. You can leave it on the tray over there. Thank you, I said, placing the envelope on the wheeled tray beside the bed. I lingered for a moment, looking down at her. Even after everything, there was still a part of me that ached for the woman I thought I had married. Noticing she was still wearing her wedding rings, I gently slid them off her finger and slipped them into my pocket. Goodbye, Vanessa, I whispered softly. I'll see you later. With a nod to the nurse, who offered me a sympathetic smile, I turned and left the room. On the way home, I called Natalie to update her on the situation. She was stunned, especially by the possibility of Vanessa being HIV positive. Ethan, You know James is not going to be comfortable with her staying here if she's HIV positive, Natalie said hesitantly. He's worried about the kids, and I can't argue with him on that. Her parents moved to Florida, so that's not an option, I said, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I guess I'll need to find her an apartment. I think that's wise, Natalie agreed. I'm really sorry, Ethan. I have to prioritize my family. She's made her choices. I can help you move her belongings, but after that, I need to step back. I understand, I said. You're doing what you need to do. It's late. Get some rest, and keep me posted, Natalie added. I will. Thanks for everything, Natalie. After hanging up, I drove the rest of the way home in silence, the events of the day weighing heavily on my mind. It was close to midnight by the time I walked through the door. Too drained to do anything else, I undressed and fell into bed, asleep the moment my head hit the pillow. The next morning, I woke up feeling the full burden of everything that had happened. After gathering my thoughts, I called my doctor's office. To my surprise, they had an opening later that morning. Grateful for the quick appointment, I confirmed the time and hung up. Next, I called my parents to update them on Vanessa's condition. They were shocked, especially about the possibility of her being HIV positive. Despite their shock, they offered to bring the girls to visit her if they wanted. I also shared the evidence I'd gathered about Vanessa's infidelity. Send me the details, Dad said, his voice calm but serious. I will, I promised, emailing him the photos and a brief summary of what I'd discovered. It's really bad, I admitted over the phone. It's okay, son. We'll get through this together, Dad reassured me. Once I had sent the email, I called Emily to inform her of the latest developments. She was taken aback by the news, but assured me this would allow her to expedite the divorce process. Next, I contacted Vanessa's office to inform her colleagues about her accident. They expressed their concern and promised to visit her soon. The following 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Between hospital visits, caring for the girls, and dealing with legal matters, I barely had a moment to catch my breath. Eventually, I found a suitable 2-bedroom ground-floor apartment with an attached garage. I secured it by paying the deposit and 2 months' rent up front, using funds from Vanessa's half of our joint accounts. It wasn't an ideal solution, but it was necessary. When Natalie arrived with the girls, we began packing up all of Vanessa's belongings, including our wedding album, and moved them into her new apartment. The process was exhausting, but necessary. In the midst of this chaos, I received the DNA test results confirming that both girls were indeed mine. It was a small but significant relief, something solid to hold on to in a world that felt like it was falling apart. Later, I met with the insurance adjuster to inspect what was left of Vanessa's wrecked car. Both of us were amazed she had survived the crash, given the twisted metal and shattered glass. Since the car and insurance policy were in her name, the insurance company would issue the settlement check directly to her. After gathering the last of her personal items from the car, I delivered them to her apartment, hoping to finally close that painful chapter and focus on moving forward. A week after the accident, during a call with my mom, she asked, "Have you been to see Vanessa?" "No, not since the first visit." "Why?" I asked. "I was just wondering," she said with a concerned tone. "She made it clear she doesn't care about us and wants to escape everything," I explained. "I'm giving her what she wants, just not the way she planned." 2 weeks after the accident, I visited my doctor. Thankfully, the gonorrhea Vanessa had passed on was fully treated, but we were still waiting for results to confirm whether I was in the clear for anything more serious. Physically, I was healing, but emotionally, I still had a long way to go. Later that day, I called my boss, Brian, to let him know I would be returning to work soon. He sounded genuinely pleased, telling me he'd kept my reports up to date and was glad I was coming back. That same afternoon, the hospital called to inform me that Vanessa had woken from her coma. The nurse suggested I visit that evening, which fit well with my schedule. I updated Emily, who had already filed the divorce papers and was waiting for Vanessa to regain consciousness so the documents could be served. She arranged for the bailiff to meet me at the hospital. Next, I called Natalie. "Would you be willing to join me at the hospital later?" I asked. "Of course," she said without hesitation. Then I spoke to my daughters. "Your mom's awake," I told them. Their reactions were indifferent. Chloe shrugged, while Sophie didn't look up from her homework. I'm going to see her this evening. Would you like to come? No thanks, Dad, Chloe replied firmly. I'm too mad at her right now. Same, added Sophie. And I have a ton of homework. All right, I said, respecting their feelings. I'll drop you off at your grandparents' house before I go. By 4:30 p.m., I was driving the girls to my parents' house. Vanessa's awake, and I'm meeting Natalie and the bailiff at the hospital, I told Dad as we arrived. Let us know how it goes, son, he said. We'll have Mom's lasagna ready for you when you get back. Sounds perfect, I replied, managing a slight smile. Mom's lasagna had a way of making any day better. At the hospital, Natalie and I met with the bailiff, who handed me the envelope containing the divorce papers. We entered Vanessa's room quietly. She looked pale and weak, her eyes fluttering open as we approached. Vanessa Cooper, the bailiff said formally, handing her the envelope. You've been served with divorce papers. Vanessa's hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. There was a long pause as she scanned the top page, her face draining of color. I see, she murmured, placing the papers on the bed beside her. I turned to Natalie, who had remained silent, her expression somber. Thanks for being here, I said quietly. Of course, she replied softly, her eyes still on Vanessa. We need to resolve this, I told Vanessa. For everyone's sake. She nodded, her eyes downcast. I understand, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I never wanted it to come to this. I know, I said, though deep down, I wasn't sure if that was entirely true. But here we are. The room grew heavy with unspoken words and tension. Sensing it was time to leave, I said, I'll let you rest. Thank you, Ethan. And I am sorry, she added, her voice cracking slightly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. Natalie and I left the room in silence. Outside, she gave my arm a gentle squeeze. Are you okay? She asked. I will be, I replied, managing a small smile. Thanks for coming. It meant a lot. Call me if you need anything, she said before hugging me briefly. I will. As I drove away from the hospital, a sense of relief mixed with lingering sorrow. The weight of the past few weeks seemed to lift slightly. The future was uncertain, but at least I was finally moving forward. The bailiff had done his job efficiently, handing Vanessa the envelope and snapping a picture to confirm service. Before leaving, he had glanced at me and offered a simple, good luck. As I replayed the moment in my mind, Vanessa's voice echoed. You couldn't even wait until I was out of the hospital? No, I had replied firmly. You were the one who wanted to run away. I'm just accelerating your timeline by a few years. Her eyes had searched mine for any trace of the man she once knew. Do the girls know? She had asked, her tone uncertain. Yes, they do. And they're not exactly thrilled with you right now. That's why they're not here, I had said without flinching. I'm seeking full custody. You'll have liberal visitation rights if the girls choose to see you, but as of now, they don't want to. Vanessa's expression faltered, clearly caught off guard by my decisiveness. And I suppose you hate me too, she had ventured, her voice tinged with regret. Hate is a strong word, I had replied calmly. Let's just say my opinion of you has significantly diminished. She had nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of my words. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? She had asked, a hint of desperation in her voice. Maybe someday, I had said evenly, when I can look at our girls and not see the hurt you've caused. And just so you know, I had their DNA tested. They're mine. Her eyes widened slightly, caught off guard by how proactive I had been. That won't change anything, Ethan, she murmured quietly, almost to herself. I see, I said, shifting the conversation. When you're discharged, you won't be coming back home. I've rented an apartment for you, and Natalie has agreed to help you move in. Vanessa turned toward her sister, but Natalie remained silent, her expression unreadable. All your belongings are already there, and the utilities are set up in your name, I continued, pulling out another envelope. Here's your half of our joint savings, minus the deposit and 2 months' rent for the apartment. Since your car was totaled, you'll also be receiving a payout from the insurance company. She hesitated before taking the envelope, her hand trembling slightly. A heavy silence settled over the room, thick with the finality of what was happening. I added, "By the way, I know about the escape fund you were building. My attorney has frozen that account. If you sign the divorce papers, she'll release the funds." "Minus your half, of course," Vanessa said, her voice edged with bitterness. "I'll fight you for it," she added defiantly. "I wouldn't recommend that," I countered calmly, "unless you want all the evidence I've gathered to become public. It's quite damning." Her defiance faltered at my words, her shoulders sagging. "Have your lawyer review the papers," I said. "You'll find the terms are as fair as they can be under the circumstances." Vanessa turned to Natalie, seeking support, but found none. "You should have listened," Natalie said coldly. "You lied to everyone. Ethan, the kids, even me. I agreed to help you move into your apartment, but after that, I'm done. You need to sort yourself out." Tears welled up in Vanessa's eyes as she began to sob. "I'm so sorry," she cried, looking to her sister for sympathy. "That and a few bucks will get you a coffee," Natalie snapped. "I won't let you near my family again until you start making things right, starting with a genuine apology to Ethan and the girls." Through her tears, Vanessa turned to me. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I know it doesn't mean much now, but I do love you." "You're right," I replied coldly. "It doesn't mean much. Sign the papers, Vanessa." Overwhelmed and silent, she nodded. "Goodbye, Vanessa," I said as I turned to leave. "Ethan, can I call the girls, please?" she asked softly. "You can call them," I said, pausing at the door. "But it's up to them if they want to talk to you." "I understand," she murmured. "Thank you for that, at least." "You're welcome," I said without turning back. I left the room, aware of the disapproving glances from some of the nursing staff. They might not have approved of the timing, but this wasn't their decision to judge. Driving away from the hospital, I headed straight to my parents' house. There, surrounded by family, I found some comfort in a hearty serving of Mom's lasagna. The familiar warmth of home soothed the sting of an otherwise painful day. The divorce process proceeded smoothly, without any significant hurdles. 3 months later, I was not only legally free from Vanessa but also relieved to learn that I was HIV negative, a fortunate result that Vanessa shared as well. To my surprise, Emily handed me a check for over $450,000, representing half of the secret account Vanessa had amassed. With no immediate plans for such a large sum, I allocated it toward college funds for Chloe and Sophie. Life gradually found a new rhythm. My daughters became my anchor, keeping me grounded through the challenges of single fatherhood. Managing 2 teenage girls on my own wasn't easy, but with my mother's guidance and support, I navigated the ups and downs. Vanessa, meanwhile, began to rebuild her life. After leaving her previous job under a cloud of scandal, she joined a new real estate firm and worked hard to redeem herself. Over time, the girls started to reconnect with her, and they occasionally spent an afternoon together. According to them, she seemed genuinely changed, more grounded and less deceptive. As life moved forward, I noticed growing attention from some of the single women at church. They often sent me home with homemade dishes, pies, casseroles, even lasagna. My daughters didn't miss a beat. "Dad, you need to start dating again," Chloe said one evening, catching me off guard. "It's not good for you to be alone." "I wouldn't even know where to start," I admitted, feeling completely out of touch with the dating world. "Besides, I'm not alone. You two keep me pretty busy." "We won't be around forever," Sophie pointed out, half serious, half teasing. "It's simple, Dad. Just ask someone to dinner. You can do that, right?" Her words lingered with me. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to explore life beyond being a father. That very Wednesday, I ran into Rachel Brooks at the church's coffee shop. A widow raising her teenage daughter alone, Rachel had recently given me a casserole that I particularly enjoyed. "Hi, Rachel. How are you?" I asked, recalling the comfort her dish had brought. "Hanging in there, Ethan. How about you?" "I'm doing okay. Really enjoyed that casserole last week. Thanks again." "I'm glad. It's tough managing on your own, isn't it?" She sympathized. "Yeah, it is," I agreed, finding common ground in our shared experience as single parents. Over coffee, we talked about the challenges of raising teenagers alone. The conversation flowed easily, and before long, I decided to take a leap. Rachel, I'm new to this whole thing, but would you like to have dinner with me sometime? Maybe this Friday? Her smile was warm and genuine. Yes, Ethan, I'd like that. Great, I said, feeling a flicker of excitement. How about that new Texas Roadhouse place? Sounds perfect, she agreed. It's a date then. As I left the coffee shop, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in a long time. Maybe it really was time for a fresh start, not just for me, but for everyone involved. When Friday arrived, I dropped the girls off at my parents' house, and they were thrilled about spending the evening with their grandparents. Meanwhile, Rachel and I enjoyed a wonderful dinner. She looked beautiful in a simple denim skirt, and our conversation was effortless. By the end of the evening, I realized how much I had missed companionship. As I dropped her off at her house, she leaned in and gave me a heartfelt kiss. I caught a glimpse of 3 faces peeking out from her window, cheering us on. Rachel hugged me tightly and whispered, "That was the best night I've had in months." Me too, I admitted. "Let's do this again soon," she suggested, her smile playful. "Maybe next time we can have a quiet evening in." "That sounds like a plan," I said, feeling a spark of excitement. When I picked up the girls, they were eager to know how the date had gone. Their enthusiasm mirrored my own. Spending time with Rachel felt natural and refreshing. While I didn't know exactly where things might lead, I was finally open to finding out. Life was beginning to move forward, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful.